Hello everyone, my name is Rick Howard and I am the Chief Security Officer for Palo Alto Networks. I'm going to talk today about cyber hacktivism and see if I can give you an overview so that you understand what this movement is all about. Hacktivism really popped up in our culture between 2010 and 2011. That time frame is when Anonymous popped into where most people understood what those guys were, or at least that they were out there. That groups like Anti-Sec and Low-Sec popped up. And that franchise really started to get legs in our culture. And it caused fear in commercial organizations at the C-suite that they may do damage to their companies. It really was the perfect storm of technology and disenfranchisement from our youth population, pranks as an art form, empowerment, and the hacking culture all coming together into a giant hairball of activity and hacking that caused fear in our senior leadership in commercial organizations and caused political leaders to double clutch on their internet policies in their own countries. And like I said, it really is a franchise because it is not a clubhouse. You do not sign a membership to become part of the Anonymous. You do not have dues. There is no clubhouse. There's nothing like that. It is basically an idea that because you use it, you become more powerful when you influence the media, because that is what you're trying to do, is get your message out to the masses. So here's an example of how this works. If I want to protest something, let's say I want to protest like the hacktivist group Anonymous did against Japan's dolphin hunt. I can get my signs out and stand in front of a corner. I can write about it in my blog as my white hat. Or if I'm a bad guy, I can send a denial of service attack against the government to stop them from doing their dolphin hunts. All right. But if I do it in that guise, nobody cares. Nobody knows who I am. And nobody cares what I'm doing. I may get enjoyment out of doing what I'm doing, but it has no influence in the culture at large. Okay, so instead of doing that, if I just claim I want to be, if I claim that Rick Howard is now not me, but part of the Anonymous movement, and tie it together with all the trappings of Matrix-like videos and social media, I can amplify my voice to the media because they all think that I'm a group and I have power, and that works beautifully if you're trying to do change in the environment. It gives me heft. Anonymous has heft in the world because the media thinks it has heft, and therefore it does have heft. Okay, so and that gives us a chance to move forward and to use this operation as an idea, and is not really a club to go to do stuff. So how does it work? It's really a two-tier system. The leaders are the coordinators. They're very high profile. They pick surgical targets. They're trying to inflict as much damage as possible, but the roster changes. It doesn't mean whatever you're going after today is not going to use the same leadership that you might go after tomorrow. And then on the bottom tier is the other groups, the other people that are interested in what you're doing. They are loosely affiliated. They have lower level technical skill, but they're all for whatever mission that the group is trying to accomplish. This is not new either. This popped up, we've known about this kind of activity before, this two-tier system. First documented in a book called People, Power, and Change, written by Luther Gerlach and Virginia Hine. Okay, they were trying to document how these two organizations back in the 60s operated, the Pentecostal Church, which are very anonymous-like, and the Black Panther Party, which had the same characteristics. And they came up with a really nifty acronym they used to describe this called Segmentary Polycentric Integrated Network, which is fancy words to say a diverse and dynamic groups, multiple and temporary leadership, and overlapping activities and shared ideas. Overlapping meaning that one person may be involved in 2 or 3 different operations, but not in the 4th or 5th. But the best way I've heard it described is by this guy, Chris Landers. He's a journalist for the Baltimore City paper, and he described it this way back in 2008. Anonymous is sort of like a flock of birds, that any number of birds can join the flock, any number can leave, and any others can peel off in another direction to do something completely different. I thought that was a pretty simple way to describe how the Anonymous movement works. And it got started back in the 4-channel days. This is from an excellent article by Wired magazine in 2012, in a sub-channel inside a 4-channel called the /B channel. And this is an absolutely awful place to go. If you have sensitive ears, you should not spend any time in the /B forum. There's random discussions, anonymous authors, and no archive. but the only way to get noticed inside that channel is to be as shocking as possible. You're trying to outshock the last person who said the most shocking thing you ever heard on the planet, and it's pretty disturbing and disgusting. And if you don't want to be anywhere near that, I wouldn't go near that channel. Okay, and then that's how it kind of popped out. Anonymous kind of bolted out of the /B channel, that people were in there trying to make everybody else laugh, and that's where you hear the term the lulls, the laughs in hacker speak. Black hats are doing all the anonymous activity just to get laughs out of the system to prank other people. Okay, but at some point it started to peel off and come up with something else. The people doing it for the laughs peeled off and said, you know what, we can use this power to change the internet in their minds for good. And so they became the self-appointed immune system of the internet, if you talk to them about it. And it's just like the bird analogy. Some of them peeled off and did something else completely. Where we started to learn about Anonymous was really starting in 2008, when Tom Cruise, the famous actor, came out with a very public video supporting Scientology. And the people at /B thought this was hilarious, and they just started passing that video around to anybody and everybody who would want to see it. Okay, now you may not know, but Scientology is a very litigious organization, and their solution for dealing with that viral distribution of the video was trying to sue all the internet service providers that hosted that video that wasn't supposed to be out there in the first place. Well, that really ticked off the Anonymous guys, and they decided they were going to punish the Scientology group for their wicked ways. And they came up with something called Project Chanology, which they orchestrated across 90 cities on the same day. It's where they first rolled out the Guy Fawkes mask. Guy Fawkes, for those of you who don't know, is a famous activist in England back in the day who tried to blow up the British Parliament. Many of them, that became the symbol. Guy Fawkes, his face, which is very distinguished, became the symbol for the Anonymous movement. And they protested in the same day, 90 different cities across all the Scientology headquarters around the world. And it was like, oh my goodness, the internet is here. So between 2008 and 2012, the Anonymous members in this particular project, Project Chanology, would not let up on Scientology. They kept after them and kept after them, lots of different organizations. They introduced this new technology called the low orbit ion cannon, which allowed non-technical users to launch denial of service attacks against a specified target. You just downloaded the software, gave it the IP address of the target you were going for, and the software would do the rest. And then in September 10, something else happened. These guys, AIplex, told the world that they were contracted by Bollywood to stop copyright violations from appearing on the internet. And they were authorized to launch denial of service attacks against all internet service providers who maintained a copy of a copyrighted movie from Bollywood on their sites. Well, what do you think that did for Anonymous? They were not happy with that, and they went after all of these guys, AIplex, the Motion Picture Association of America, and the Recording Industry Association of America. By the way, the last two have no association with Bollywood whatsoever. Well, that didn't matter to them. They went after all of them, loaded up the low orbit ion cannons, and tried to take those sites down with denial of service attacks. And this is that flock of birds doing it, some of them doing it for the laughs, but now some of them saying, you know what, we don't like how AIplex was going to be able to DOS internet service providers just because they had content that they didn't approve of. So now it's them branching off to be the immunization system of the internet. This is that empowerment. This is when people started to say, you know what, as a group, we have more power than if we do it by ourselves. Then the next big thing that happened was in October, between October and November 2010, it's when the WikiLeaks thing was going on and Julian Assange was in the papers all the time. MasterCard, Visa, and PayPal decided they would stop supporting any payments going to WikiLeaks because they didn't agree with what Julian Assange was doing. So the Anonymous movement started Operation Avenge Assange, and they loaded up the low orbit ion cannons and went after those three big financial systems in the same way they did before, and took those systems offline. However, the dirty secret here is that most of the things that most of the users running the low orbit ion cannon had no effect. Okay, there were the 4,500 users is not enough power to take those gigantic financial systems offline. And what was needed was a high-end botnet that might be used in other typical kinds of denial of service attack. So that's what the leaders of the group did. They let the users come in and use their low orbit ion cannon so they could be part of the operation, but really the damage was done by a full-scale botnet operation running a denial of service attack against those sites. The problem was that the low orbit ion cannon was not that well, it wasn't very secure, which is funny that it wasn't that secure, that it didn't hide the IP address that was launching the denial of service attacks, and nobody that devised the software told the anonymous folks that were interested in Operation Avenge Assange that there might be some danger, and 13 were indicted because of their participation in that operation. It moved on to more hacktivism, more immunization type of hacktivism. In January 2011, this guy, Slim Amamou, was a political leader in Tunisia and was put behind jail. Most people didn't like that, so that began the Arab Spring protests, the now infamous Arab Spring protests between 2011 and 2012. Okay, Operation in Tunisia and turned into Operation Freedom Ops. It is really that empowerment saying that we together can change the world and operating as an internet immunization system. But probably the most interesting one, the most famous hacktivism attack happened against Aaron Barr, who was the CEO of HB Gary Federal. Okay, he was just getting his federal business started. It was a small company. He was a previous government intelligence guy, and he was trying to get some PR for his business. And what he did was crazy. He called the press and said, "You know what? I know who the leaders of the anonymous movement are, and I'm going to announce who they are at a big cybersecurity conference coming up in a few weeks." And if you've been paying attention to what I said in the past, you know there are no leaders of Anonymous, that each operation has its own leaders, and they disappear as soon as that operation is done. So he said he knew who 30 active members were, they knew 10 senior decision makers, and he knew he had linked their IRC handles to real names. He was going to release that information to the press. Well, what do you think the Hacktivism group did with this? Within 48 hours, a blitzkrieg of activity against the HB Gary federal systems happened. They compromised Mr. Barr's Twitter account. They found his presentation on his laptop and posted it to the internet and then ridiculed it because of how wrong it was. Okay, they compromised the HB Gary Federal's email servers and web servers, grabbed every document they could find and posted it on Pirate Bay for anybody to review if they wanted to review that. Okay. There's a charter inside the /B channel that are called the rules of the internet. And this one said, when they defaced the HB Gary Federal website, this domain has been seized by Anonymous under Section 14 of the rules of the internet. And there are rules of the internet, and here they are listed. You could look them up if you'd like to. Here they are specifically, and these are the ones that they were pointing out. Do not talk about /B. The second one is do not talk about /B, so I'm actually violating the rules of the internet here. Okay, this is where they get their name. This is one of the more famous ones. Do not argue with trolls. It means they win. They don't argue. They just attack, and that's what they were saying. That's number 14. Don't argue with trolls. It means they win. And so they went after Aaron Barr in a very specific and damaging way. So the impact to HB Gary was that Aaron Barr was ostracized. He was fired from his job as the CEO of HB Gary Federal. It took him a year to find a job. Okay, HB Gary implodes. It is out of business. And at the end of it all, Mr. Barr couldn't put an end to it, and he gets in the /B and was asking around about the attack on HB Gary systems. The leader of that attack was a hacker by the name of Sabu, and they got into the chat room and started talking to each other. And this is what Sabu said to Mr. Barr inside the /B channel. You intended of battling Anonymous in the media for media gain and attention. You got the media attention now. Well, let me ask you, how does it feel? Ouch, that must have hurt a lot. So Sabu, in charge of that organization against HB Gary, decides to break away from Anonymous, form his own hacktivism group called LulzSec, and he takes these guys with him, Jake Davis, his hacker name was Topiary, and the rest of these guys. They go on a 50-day hacking spree. doing server compromises, data loss, and denial of service attacks against all these different companies, right? And then at the end of that 50 days, the FBI comes to Sabu's door and says, we know who you are, and you have a choice. You can either work for us, or you can go to jail for a gazillion years. And what do you think he decided? Faced up to 124 years in prison, he decides to become an informant to the FBI. Immediately after that, he dissolves LulzSec because he didn't like the fact that they were attacking all those companies for the laughs. He said in public and in /B forums that he was interested in more strictly political hacktivism, and he formed a new group called Anti-Sec, but this time it was being sponsored by the FBI. In fact, the servers where they collected most of their data was paid for by the FBI. There are other news in hacktivism that didn't belong to LulzSec and Anti-Sec. In 2009, this guy, Oscar Grant, was killed by a Bay Area rapid transit police officer. Okay, in fact, they made a movie of it that came out last year called Fruitfield Station. And this guy was also killed by a rapid transit police officer. His name was Charles Hill. And so protests were starting to happen, okay, in the area about the brutality of the Bay Area rapid transit police officers. The BART leaders decided they were going to cut cell phone service at the train stations in anticipation of the scheduled protests. Well, that started Operation BART. The Bay Area rapid transit servers were compromised. All their customer data was doxed. Their public spokesman named Linton Johnson, they compromised his phone and took nude photos of him off his phone and posted it out to Pirate Bay for anybody to see. And their actions snarled traffic in the Bay Area for weeks because of that protest. Now, this is more of the traditional hacktivism approach. It didn't belong to LulzSec or Anti-Sec, so there were other things going on at the same time that LulzSec and Anti-Sec were going on. But when Anti-Sec stood up, they went on another attacking spree. Okay, went after the same thing: server compromises, doxing, and denial of service attacks. At the end of it all, though, Anti-Sec and anonymous members, the FBI arrested about 80 of them when all that was done. The big coup de grace for Anti-Sec was the attack against Stratfor, sponsored by the FBI. Stratfor is a commercial cyber intelligence business. They spent weeks inside their systems, compromised over 5 million email messages. They stored them all on the server provided by the FBI, and they turned the entire collection over to WikiLeaks. Okay, that's probably the largest public doxing by anonymous to date. And they charged $700,000 to Stratfor credit card subscribers. You can buy stuff off the Stratfor website if you want it, all under the supervision of the FBI. And that goes to show you that the FBI is not your friend if you're a business. They are there to put criminals behind bars. If they have to kind of destroy a company to do it, they will gladly do that to get their man. So think twice about cooperating with the FBI in these kinds of investigations. So at the end of all that 50-day attacking spree, another 25 anonymous members were arrested, and then in March of 2012, the FBI announced to the world that Sabu was their informant. Oh my goodness. Okay, it tears the heart out of the anonymous organization. He was one of the key leaders. Everybody respected him. The fact that he was an informant scared everybody crazy, and they all went scurrying to dark corners of the internet so that they would not get arrested also. In the end, over 100 other anonymous members were arrested. Most of the LulzSec team was arrested. The only one that got away was AV Unit, and nobody knows who he is, and by all accounts, he is still at large. Most of this discussion was taken from this most excellent book, We Are Anonymous, by Parmi Olson. She called this whole operation, this idea of anonymous, a mirage of power and scale. About a small group of folks can cause this much fear in commercial organizations and government organizations, and really making us all believe that there was a much larger group doing all the attacks, when really it was a small set of people causing the damage. Very interesting indeed. So at the end of this, is anonymous done? Not by any means. There's lots of anonymous activity going on, but we actually know what the operations are now, so probably not as scary. But these are the ones that happened since. And there's been plenty more. These are just some of the examples. All right, so the conclusions you can take from this is that hacktivism is not new, but the internet has made cyber hacktivism possible at incredible speeds. Okay, they're not clubs. Anonymous is not a club, it's a franchise. And the demise of the two main groups, LulzSec and NDSEC, is only a temporary setback. Other activist operations are going on. And you know what? Activism is not bad, only if you're on the receiving end of it, especially in the U.S. It's been a popular part of our culture. If you don't agree with something, you should be able to protest against it. It's when you cross a line and commit crimes is when it starts to go bad for you.